On. Mr. Thurston, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and hopping on and sharing some of your insights with us. So I truly and very much appreciate it.
Hey, no, this will be fun. I appreciate the invitation. It's a little
Yeah.
something different out of my day.
Hey, yeah, definitely. Mr. Thurston, if you don't mind, can you just introduce yourself and tell us what you do in Kern County and how long you've been doing it for?
Yeah, my name is Marc Thurston, and I've been selling real estate for 30 years with a
Wow,
company called ASU Commercial. I exclusively sell multifamily properties. That's it.
that's it. Multifamily, and that is it.
That is it.
That's awesome. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the single family residence nowadays. So I wanted to touch bases on what's happening in multifamily. So one of the biggest questions that I have is how has it affected the multifamily industry with this COVID?
Well, like what I think the residential side is seeing, the multifamily is basically taking a pause, and you're seeing certainly a significant decrease in the number of listings coming on the market, even a further decrease in a number of those listings that are going pending, and then obviously then that has an impact on what actually ends up closing escrow.
Got it. And why is that? Why do you think like the sellers are holding off? Why are they not liquidating? I would think there would be a lot of liquidation right now.
Well, at this point, I think everybody is taking a wait and see attitude, not only just the sellers, but also the buyers. Because since we're in an unprecedented event, at least in current times,
Yeah.
nobody really knows how this is going to play out. And I think that, a lot of people have speculated on what's going to occur, but given that none of us have ever been here, it's a pretty big leap of faith to throw out that, X, Y, Z is exactly going to happen. And so I think, you know, an investment is a choice. You don't have to make an investment. And if you're sitting on cash, I think a lot of investors are going, you know what, I'll sit on it a little bit longer. Let's see how this plays out and see what type of opportunities open up on the back end.
Yeah. So are there clients sitting on a lot of 1031 exchange capital to your knowledge or?
There were some 1031 deals that were going down prior to the statewide stay-at-home.
Okay.
And now that the government has come out and postponed the 1031 into, I believe, June. So if you had one going and your expiration date was occurring, they've now pushed that back farther to allow the investor more time to try to find an alternative. And so, for example, I had two deals that were pending. Both of those buyers canceled the escrows because they said, you know what, we're willing to roll the dice and we want to see what's going to happen, later in May or in June if there are better options available for us.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that in single family also. Like, back when market was active, about 50 homes would hit the market on daily basis and 45, 47 would sell.
Mm-hmm.
Now about 25 homes are hitting the market and 19 homes are selling, so that the sale percentage is still there, but the amount of stuff hitting the market is 50% down, I think.
Yeah, I actually came up with a matrix the other day from the first week in March all
Okay.
the way to last week.
Yeah.
And it's showing between 1 to 2 new apartment listings a week. One listing is maybe pending,
Yeah.
and the actual closed deals, 1 to 2, but that's not as consistent. I mean, there's been 2 or 3 weeks where there's been nothing closed.
Yeah. What was it like before we went into all this chaos?
I would say we were seeing, well, let me back up. So I would say since January this year, the number of listings has been a lot slower.
Okay.
So I would say maybe we were seeing 5 to 7 listings a week come on the market,
Mhm.
and probably 3 to 4 go pending, and probably an equal number closing each week. So it has dropped off, but it started dropping off before we got into this whole,
Yeah.
scenario.
Okay. Okay. And one of the bigger questions I have is that there's some bailouts and government helping small business owners, right? Which is needed big time, and that's great. What about landlords? Is there any bailouts for landlords from tenants not paying rents? that
Not
you
as
know?
of yet.
Not as yet.
It has been talked about. There have been some Congress people that have brought this issue up that, they've given the residents some opportunities, with regards to either rents or with regards to, um, not paying their rent or not being evicted. But nobody yet has dealt with the landlord. And that's unfortunate because if you look at the state as a whole, probably 90% of the landlords are what would be considered mom and pop operators. And they are not deep pocketed, publicly traded companies. Everybody thinks landlord and they're thinking some company like Equity Residential that owns 50 or 60,000 units. That's not the case. Your
Yeah.
typical landlord probably has a fourplex, and maybe if they're lucky enough, they have two fourplexes.
Yeah. And
So,
that's up to 90% of them, huh?
yeah, so those folks are getting squeezed pretty hard here.
Yeah.
And we're certainly seeing that, for example, in the April rent collections. Everybody was really worried about April, but if you talk to the big management companies, most of them saw collections between 90 to 97%, which is pretty consistent with what they were seeing a year ago in April.
Wow.
But you talk to the ma and pa's, and I've had several conversations in the last week where I've had, the smaller landlords tell me that, they only collected 70% of their rents for April or
Wow.
75%.
Wow.
And yet, if you look at it from a national perspective, I just read a stat this morning, 93% of all rents were collected.
Yeah.
And so if the small landlord is struggling in April when nationally 93% were collected, May, everybody agrees, is going to be the toughest month going. May could be really hard on a lot of those small people or small landlords. We could certainly see them struggle.
Yeah, and that was my next question. Like, I was reading as well where 90% of received their payments. Why do you think the mom and pops the payment ratio was so much lower versus the big management companies?
I think the big management companies have the benefit of, not only experience, but also access to current and relevant information. Many of them are part of the IREM organization, which is the International Real Estate Management Organization. So a lot of those entities were very proactive in encouraging their members
Okay.
and their participants to become very proactive in dealing with the residents.
Got
And
it.
so, I know of a couple of companies that, mid March, they were setting up 1-800 numbers. They were setting up dedicated websites so
Wow.
that their residents could log in and say, hey, you know what? I was just laid off. This is my scenario. This is the type of help I need. I will be able to pay you this, but I'm not going to be able to pay you a full rent. What can we do about it? And so they developed policies early on. They engaged the resident, and that certainly helped make the resident feel more comfortable, make the resident feel better about paying what they can, and working through it. And what I've heard is some of the larger companies have experienced up to about a 5% reach out from those residents that are struggling.
Okay.
And they were proactive in taking care of that versus the mom and pa's. Many of them probably were, either didn't reach out and waited for the tenant to say something or the tenant not to say anything and then go, hey, where's my rent?
Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily engage them early enough to come up with a plan.
So I think the difference was basically they were shying away and not keeping open lines of communication.
Correct.
Yeah, which is unbelievable. Are you able to share some of the policies that these companies have in place that maybe mom and pop that watch these videos can try adapting? Like let's say, Mark, I lost my job. I can only pay you half. How am I recouping that rent? Or how is this company recouping that rent?
Well, I think in many cases, what they're doing is the first thing they're doing once they understand what exactly the scenario is, whether it is a layoff or the job's just been completely eliminated, and they understand what resources that resident has available. In many cases, if that resident was to say, "Hey, I can pay you a half month's rent," they're definitely going to take that. and then they're going to sign one of those rent addendums that you've seen, widely used on the internet. You just type in rent addendum for postponing rent, and it will lay out several different scenarios of whether you're going to pay it in the month of August, you're going to break it over the course of 6 months, and you're going to pay small increments each month. But they're coming up with scenarios that will work for both parties.
Wow. Wow. It's very unfortunate. I mean, it breaks my heart that these families are going through such tough times, and then landlords are going through such tough times, and there's just no support. It's unbelievable.
It is tough, but the one thing I think that's really come out of it is 99% of the residents appreciate what landlords do, and the landlords certainly appreciate their residents.
Yeah.
And so I think, as you just touched on, the communication's been the big key. And
Yeah.
if both parties are talking to each other, there are solutions there.
Yeah.
And I think both parties realize that, none of us brought this necessarily upon ourselves. This just happened, and
Yeah.
we're all along for the ride, and we're all in the same boat here.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I
so
agree. I think if we
obviously,
just all got together and worked on it together, it would be a better solution for all parties, and it's a win-win.
I
That
agree.
So what the rents? I mean, I know in month of May it's going to be tough, and I believe in 15th of May they're talking about lifting the orders, right? And after May goes by, what do you think the rents will be like? Going forward, do you think there will be a decline in rents? Do you think there will be an increase in rents? What are your thoughts about that?
That's a great question. I think ultimately that's going to be dictated by the demand for apartments or rentals.
Okay.
And, talking to some of the management companies, they've had actually really good lease up rates over the last 30 days, which has been surprising. The
Okay.
numbers have not really been that far off what you saw a year ago.
Okay.
So, but then I've talked to others, and I've read other things where people say, well, if people have lost their jobs and the jobs have gone away and they're not coming back, then the formations of households, meaning, person that wants to go out and live on their own, is going to decline. And so if that occurs, then obviously you would see a spike in vacancies. And if you get a spike in vacancies, then you're going to typically see an adjustment in the rents that are going to follow. So I guess it really depends how fast the market comes back, and what the optimism is amongst renters.
Yeah.
If they think they can get by for a couple months and they'll have a job again, then great, they're going to continue to rent. But if things look bad, they might decide, hey, I'm going to go move back in with my parents, or I'm going to move in with another, family friend, and you could see the inventory increase.
Oh wow. It was what you just said. Is that on a Bakersfield hyper local level, or was that on a general U.S. across the board?
Well, as far as what we're seeing, as far as the strength, that's specifically here in Bakersfield.
Okay.
As far as the speculation on the household creation, I mean that's being talked about by every national multifamily player. They're all curious what's going to happen, and everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mind sharing yours, or do you want to stay out of that picture?
I'll sit on the sidelines on that one.
Okay. Fair enough. I don't know if you know anything about commercial lending. I know uh, if you buy anything larger than fourplex, you have to go commercial side, right, on the loan.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been an effect, or has the guidelines tightened up that you know of?
I guess I would say the lending side has been impacted from a number of reasons. So one, now all of a sudden you have all of these mortgage personnel that are working remotely,
Mm-hmm.
which has certainly slowed down the process. Obviously lenders are getting the same information as the rest of us, and
Yeah.
they don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
So I would say that in some instances, yes, maybe their underwriting is a little harsher than it was, say, 90 days ago. They have been, I don't want to say wishy-washy, but I have heard of several deals that had commitments that, the buyer or the borrower thought, hey, we're moving towards closing of the loan, and then all of a sudden something comes up, and the lender goes, you know what, we're not going to do this deal. So I would say we're getting a mixed set of results out there at the moment. But the process definitely is slower. Obviously, appraisers are now working on an entirely different set of instructions on how they go about appraising a property.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's a learning curve for everybody to get up to speed. And, it certainly has impacted the deal flow. And then now, for example, I was just on the phone with a client this morning who says, he's having trouble getting his loan through because the lender is dealing with all of these government programs where they're trying to put money back out, and the lender is focused on that, and they're not necessarily focused on doing purchases.
Wow.
So, I mean, that is a struggle that everybody's dealing with. And, it just requires people to be more patient, and that's not only from the broker's perspective, but also from the seller's perspective, as well as the buyers.
Yeah. Just all parties. We all have to hang tight in there and just
Yes.
day by day, right? Because things are
Day by
changing
day.
so fast. And I'm a new investor myself. I own a few doors. For what is a good multifamily pickup in your opinion? And I'm not gonna hold you to this, just completely an opinion and what your thoughts are. But yeah, what would that be like if somebody wants to pick up a fourplex going forward? What would be a good cap ratio if you could touch on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question because, obviously the world has changed over the last 6 weeks. And
Yeah.
so, going into the stay at home, prices were actually down in Bakersfield. Not only was the
Wow.
volume down by 20%, but prices were actually down 8.9%.
And
And
this is
so
before or after?
this was before.
Oh wow.
So you look at that and you go, okay, well, obviously the market was slowing down. Now, was it slowing down in anticipation and because there was clearly news coming out about the pandemic? Was it slowing down because this is an election year and people just don't know which way to go? Was it slowing down because the volatility in the stock market and there was a lot of uncertainty in the market, and uncertainty makes investors nervous? So there were a lot of variables at play before the pandemic hit. And clearly, as we just talked about a few moments ago, there hasn't been a lot of activity since it hit. So to be able to predict what it's going to look like on the back end of this, I certainly don't think it's going to all of a sudden be wonderful. So I think that there will be some opportunities for investors from a buy side, but that's going to require some people to be willing to be sellers and to price their buildings accurately. I mean, I think you look at the inventory right now, and that inventory is staying pretty stagnant at roughly 41 or 42 listings on buildings fourplexes and larger in Bakersfield. And so what that says to me is, while there are buyers out there, those buyers are not perceiving those prices as being attractive in order to buy. And I look at the buyers who have been calling me here the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've had a lot of brokers reach out to me as well as buyers directly. And they're all saying, well, we're looking for that heavily motivated seller, somebody that's in distress, somebody that's willing to take a 20 or 30% hit on their value. And so I think all of a sudden now you see the value added investors entering the market again. But they're in the market, but there's no product for them to buy at this moment, based on a 20 or 30% discount.
Yeah, no, 20 or 30% is steep. I'm not, I mean, I don't think I don't think that's happening anytime soon, but who knows, right? 30% is kind of steep. That's a crazy number.
No, I agree. And so then the question becomes, are these buyers premature or are they just wishful thinking? I don't know. And, I don't have a crystal ball that's going to say what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
But it certainly gives pause for thought. And the fact that we were down essentially 9% before this started. So where does the year end up? Do we end up 15% down? Do we end up 20% down? I don't know yet, because I think a lot of it's going to really depend upon how fast the economy gets back to the new normal, because I think we've all recognized that it's not going to be the same as it was March 1st.
No, absolutely not.
The world has definitely changed.
Yeah. I was reading an article, and single family homeowners are sitting on approximately 30 to 40% equity, and it's kind of hard for them to let go of those homes. What about multifamily owners, or like the people that own fourplex or triplex? Do you know off the top of your head how much equity they're sitting on?
Not really. I've not heard anybody look at that. In Bakersfield, one of the interesting things, so people that entered the market during the last crash, so let's say 2009 to 2013, I suspect that those investors have a lot of equity currently.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of investors, though, that had bought between 2003 and 2007 that still own properties here. And for those investors, the average price fell in 2009, 72%. So for those, a lot of them are still recovering. And that market, as of, I think, mid-February, was roughly back to 90% of the pre-crash values.
Wow.
So while they should have equity, those who bought prior to the last crash, they're still in a recovery mode to some extent.
Yeah.
And so they're not fully 100% back to where they were.
Yeah. So do you, do you foresee about a lot of pre-foreclosures or short sales coming up with multifamily?
Too early to tell.
Too early to tell, huh?
Definitely. Too early to tell.
Okay.
I mean, I think if we're going to see it, it is going to be in the smaller investor.
Yeah, like mom and pops.
Yeah, that, unfortunately didn't see this coming and didn't have enough reserves, or had bought a building for an absolute premium that had minimal cash flow, and they used all of their down payment to get into it, and they're going, oh my gosh, I need to get out of this. Those are going to be the people, I think, that will be more motivated to sell. Then the question becomes, how much equity do they have in order to exit? And, then it could become a question of a short sell. But then you look at the lenders, what's the lender's attitude going to be? Because the lenders definitely, if it goes a short sell route, they're going to have a say in the matter. And are they going to be open-minded to this and receptive? Or are they going to say, hey, you know what, you need to work it out. And if you don't work it out, we're going to take it back in foreclosure.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Marc, you've been selling for 30 years. I've been selling for 3 years. So you have 10x the experience. What advice do you have for agents like myself in the marketplace today?
Well, I think the key is to just be informed. And, this could present an opportunity to certainly to pick up some nice properties. Yeah. Depending upon how the market reacts on the back end of this. Yeah. But anytime you have a major shift in a market or a change, there always is opportunities. And, a lot of people shy away from it. And really, that's the time that you really need to be digging through it and looking for those little hidden gems that are out there, because that's truly where you build wealth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fair enough. Well, Marc, once again, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add to the call today, or?
No, everybody stay healthy and stay safe, and we'll get through this.
Absolutely. Marc, thank you so much. You have a great day, sir.
Great. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.